We are back for another episode of Syracuse Sports. You know who else is back? Syracuse Lacrosse is back in the Final Four. Man, used to be able to set your watch to Syracuse being in the Final Four. 22 consecutive Final Fours from 1983 to 2009. It's been a while, but Syracuse is back. They are taking on Maryland in Foxborough, Cornell in Penn State. We'll join them there, and we are going to talk about that today with the great Patrick Stevens, one of the best lacrosse writers out there, covers the college lacrosse scene for USA Lacrosse Magazine. He covered all four quarterfinal games this past weekend, including Syracuse and Princeton, an epic game at Hofstra. You know, Syracuse had not played Princeton in the NCAA tournament since 2003. From 1992 to 2003, Syracuse and Princeton crossed paths a lot, including in the Final Four, including in the national championship game. And then for a good 20-year period or so, Syracuse and Princeton didn't cross paths in the tournament, but like two old friends at a high school reunion, hey, let's go out there and play vintage Syracuse-Princeton lacrosse. A game that was reminiscent, by the way, of the up and down nature of Syracuse's season. You know, this is a Syracuse team that started 3-0, outscoring their first three opponents 55-17. It was a team that was feeling itself a little bit. The expectations were there. The bar was set not only by us media types, but you had players openly talking about how the expectation was to go to and win a championship. That is Syracuse lacrosse. And that is that fine line that you cross when you're a member of a Syracuse lacrosse team. Confidence, cockiness. Got to straddle that line a little bit there. You have to expect to be good. You have to believe you're good in order to get back there. So I remember talking to players like Joey Spallina and Nick Kikamo, guys that have been around the block a few times here already for Syracuse, and to hear them, and it was not in a cocky way. It was a confident, we're Syracuse lacrosse, that's where we belong kind of way. So they start the season 3-0. They outscore their first three opponents 55-17. Their first loss of this season was to Maryland. 11-7, rainy conditions, raw conditions, hovering around 40 degrees in College Park, right? No harm, no foul. Syracuse has struggled to beat Maryland. They have lost to Maryland now 7 straight times. So it's going to be interesting as Patrick and I will talk about how the Orange find a way around this Terps team that they just can't beat. But after they lose to Maryland, they lost to Harvard at the Dome. And all of a sudden, they're 3-2. And all of a sudden, even though Jerry Byrne, the Harvard coach, comes into that press conference and says, that's a Final Four team we just played, Syracuse stepped in a pothole at that moment, right? From there, they win 6 in a row and start looking like the team again everybody thought they could be and should be at the beginning of the season. But then they lost 3 straight to end the year, and nobody could figure out what this Syracuse team was. So they go to the ACC tournament, and while there's no automatic bid in the ACC tournament, it essentially was an automatic bid for Syracuse. If they could go and win 2 games and win the ACC tournament championship, well, you're not going to keep the ACC champion out of the tournament. Syracuse plays some of its best lacrosse of the year. In particular, Jimmy McCool plays some of his best lacrosse of the year in those 2 games, making 30 combined saves and wins over Notre Dame and Duke, a Duke team that Syracuse had lost to down the stretch in the regular season, by the way. They're back, right? They go to the first round of the NCAA tournament, and there's Harvard again. And Syracuse has to pull off an epic comeback, down 11-6, just to beat Harvard in their own building and advance to the quarterfinal. And then Syracuse and Princeton says, hold my beer, and plays an epic back and forth 19-18 game that exemplified exactly what lacrosse's self-imposed moniker is: the fastest game on 2 feet. I do not think we are going to see that this time. Maryland loves to muck it up. They love to slow the game down. They love to play physical, frustrate you, grind you, and get you out of your rhythm. If Syracuse is going to beat Maryland, they're going to need to control the tempo and make Maryland chase them, as opposed to falling in that bear trap that so many teams do. Maryland has not scored more than 14 goals all year long. John Tillman is a coach that is as well prepared and as smart as any in the sport. So Syracuse is going to have their hands full. But boy, they are back in the Final Four, and Syracuse lacrosse fans everywhere are loving it. So we are going to talk to Patrick Stevens about that matchup, about Cornell, Penn State, and what was an epic weekend of quarterfinal lacrosse to separate these four teams that find themselves heading to Foxborough. If you are heading to Foxborough, by the way, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, meet up with you. Now it's interesting because Foxborough is a good 40-minute drive from Boston. So it's got a Boston feel to the Final Four, but it's actually at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, which is, not exactly a hop, skip, and a jump away from Boston, but certainly there's going to be lacrosse fans in the Boston area all weekend. I especially would love to hear from our Syracuse Sports Insiders, who have been awesome throughout lacrosse season. They want to know about this team. Even some fans that are like, hey, Brent, I'm kind of a casual lacrosse fan. And the questions you've been asking, the comments you have, everybody's swept up in it, right? They're in the Final Four and have a chance to win their 12th national championship. So would love to hear from the lacrosse fans all week long, especially if you're going to be in Foxborough. Would love to see some of you in Foxborough. But become a Syracuse Sports Insider so you can get direct text message access to me anytime. It's just $3.99 a month to be a Syracuse Sports Insider. You can try it free for 2 weeks. And what a perfect time to try it out now with the Orange in the Final Four. All right. Before we get to Patrick Stevens, though, as you know, we love to feature your original music here on Syracuse Sports. And I reached out to a bunch of artists recently that I wanted to feature on the pod. Sometimes you guys reach out to me. And if you have original music that you want to feature here on Syracuse Sports, get in touch. All the information is in the show notes on how you can do that. This is somebody I reached out to when I heard their song on the Syracuse playlist, a great feature put together by Jeff Herbert of syracuse.com. Get ready to go to the beach. The vibe on this song, it's going to take you places, I'm telling you. Max Scialdone is the artist. It's called 80 Songs. And man, do I love this tune and do I love this artist. And I think you are really going to get hooked on Max Scialdone by listening to a little bit of the song here, and then we'll play 80 songs in its entirety at the end of the podcast. So let's listen to a little bit of that now, and then Patrick Stevens on lacrosse. Let's do it. Three of the most intense, crazy, wild, all over the place lacrosse games I've seen in a quarterfinal round. You've been covering this for a while. How would you describe this quarterfinal weekend we just had?
Well, I think about there were a couple sets of quarters in like 2019 and 2021. And in both of them, there were 3 overtime games. The 2019 game had the other 19-18 quarterfinal. The Yale Penn game up in East Hartford. And then there was one dud in both of those. Penn State beat Loyola pretty badly in 2019. And there was the Virginia Georgetown game that was pretty much over in the opening minute in 2021. And so this quarterfinal was kind of similar in that you had 3 really good games and one game that you could basically check out on pretty quickly. The 7 combined goals margin for the 4 games is the smallest since all 4 quarterfinals in 2002 were 1-goal games. So it's been a while since you've had that kind of thing. I don't know if you've seen too many games quite like that Syracuse Princeton game. I don't know if we've seen too many comebacks like the Penn State Notre Dame game. And I mean, that was a game where, honestly, I had Penn State dead and buried in that game. They looked just completely shot with 20 minutes to go. And to have that turnaround against that team really was something. I thought the Cornell Richmond game was a little more conventional, but still really
Yes.
good.
Oh, absolutely.
It was a great game. It wasn't the kind of thing where you had a ton of wild things happen, but what you had was the best team in the country getting tested to the very limits by a team that had kind of similar DNA. Paul Richards coached at Cornell, is now Richmond's defensive coordinator. Teams that are just so interconnected. And so impressed, by the way, haven't seen Richmond the last 3 weekends. I think we're going to hear from them again sometime in the near future. But there's certainly 3 good games and one game that whatever. Like it was. It almost would have been better if that was the first game of the weekend rather than the last game of the weekend, because it was pretty anticlimactic for Maryland just to do its Maryland thing and play the way it did. And credit to Georgetown for having kept that thing pretty close. I mean, it was a 1-goal game in the fourth quarter, so it wasn't as if there was no tension in that game at all. But it was definitely the kind of thing that you could have stepped away for a few minutes and not really missed a whole lot.
I think that's well said. I think the Cornell-Richmond game, I've seen that before. I've seen a good, solid, close back-and-forth lacrosse game in the tournament like that. And you said it, Dan Shamati is a rising star in the coaching world. He is going to have, I don't want to, nothing against Richmond, but he's going to have a major-level job soon. A big-time Virginia, Duke, you name it, some jobs that could be opening type of job. I think he has earned that. Syracuse Princeton have played amazing games before, but man, Patrick, we were there at Hofstra. That game had everything. I was getting nervous sitting there in the Cornell Richmond press conference, and I actually ducked out early, because if I've learned anything about Syracuse is you have to watch the first quarter because it'll set the tone for so much. And what that game did is it actually kind of buried that narrative. Syracuse was down 5-2, overcame it, and there was so much offense in that game, third highest scoring game tied ever in the history of the tournament, that everything that could happen in a lacrosse game happened in that game. So what's your takeaway from Princeton Syracuse now that we've had a moment to exhale and look at it? And I'm sure there's some things we missed, but man, I can't think of anything we didn't see in that game that you can see in a lacrosse game.
Well, we got to see a goalie get a 2-minute penalty. I'm not sure I've ever seen that. That's not something you see every day. You obviously have Syracuse coming from down, were they down 4 at one point, or was 3 the largest deficit?
I think it was 5-2 was the largest deficit.
Okay, and Princeton came back from down 5 to take the lead. I had a feeling that game could be high scoring. I mean, both teams can score. Both teams have goalies that are kind of hit or miss, kind of streaky. Both teams, offensive personnel that's really, really strong. I kind of think about when I look at, Syracuse, you mentioned coming back from down those 3 goals. I just think about you've given up this 5-goal lead in like 7 or 8 minutes, and then you regroup and you figure out a way to gut through. And it kind of keeps going back to this idea that I've had that there's just been this sort of regular progression, like for under Gary Gate, from bad at 4-10, and everybody knew it was bad, and it was probably worse than people expected initially, to you're playing a bunch of kids and they get better throughout that second season, and they finish 8-7, but they're dangerous by the end of the year. And then you get into year 3 and you get back to the tournament. You win a tournament game. You're in a tight quarterfinal and you lose. And making that Final Four was really kind of the next logical step. Is this a 5-year progression? Is it a 4-year progression? Does it go even bigger? I'm not sure. We're going to find out. But, I do think that it's harder to have long championship windows in this sport now than there was in the 80s and 90s. And Syracuse's is definitely opening right now. How long is it open? It's probably open for at least another year, right? I mean, you got a really good junior class. I'm sure Syracuse would like that window to be open 3 or 4 years. But it's open now, and it's up to them to go do something with it.
It's open, and we can get more into the specifics of the Maryland matchup here in a moment. But generally, because that window is open, they've gotten back there. And what I'm wondering about with this team, Patrick, is how much of this can they look past the euphoria of they're back in the Final Four? You still have to win 2 more games. And when you haven't been there this long, look at Maryland, for example, who just, you get recruited to play at Maryland, John Tillman can tell you you're going to play in multiple Final Fours, and he will keep that promise. There is a machine-like just efficiency to that. I'm wondering how much Syracuse can shrug that off and stick to Gary's. It's the most cliche of all coaching cliches, but he has done it all year. He felt like they got a little too they were reading their own press clippings a little bit too much at the beginning of the year and expecting a Final Four and the expectations that were there, which they did meet in a way. So how do you put that behind you and win a championship now if you're Syracuse, when you have a lot of guys looking around here for the first time on this team? The program and the history, of course, is there, but these guys have never been here before, and you're playing a team that knows all the ways in and out of this thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned making sure you saw the first 5 minutes of a Syracuse game. Like, I feel like you'll have a decent idea 5 to 10 minutes in on Saturday against Maryland. How well do you just kind of deal with the moment right there? Maryland's not a team that's going to go out and score a lot of goals. They haven't scored more than 14 all season. But they're also really adept at being able to clamp down and take strengths away, and especially when they have a full week or close to a full week to get ready. So I think that's going to go a long way for Syracuse. And what do things look like with 5 minutes left in the first quarter? Is it 3-1 Maryland and you got guys that just can't find room? I don't think Maryland is going to take the same defensive approach, for example, that Princeton did. I mean, Princeton basically was like, well, it's going to be man-to-man and it's going to, win your matchup. Well, that's pretty good for Syracuse. I've seen enough Maryland-Syracuse postseason games over the years, and just regular season games too, that, if Maryland gives them a chance, to, take shots from the outside and Syracuse takes them, well, that's not a very good pathway. And so we'll see how quick people are to take shots. We'll see how calm the defense is, quite frankly, because Maryland will gradually pick you apart, even if you don't necessarily have a single matchup. Like, that number one matchup might not scare you as much as dealing with a Coulter Magazine, dealing with a Sam King, dealing, with an Owen Duffy or Dom Petramalo. We can run down the list. I don't think Maryland has as scary a number one option as most of the teams that Syracuse has played over the last couple months.
That's a great point.
But 5 and 6 are really, really capable. And they have,
Right.
And they put pressure on you that way by simply keeping the ball, keeping it spinning, doing all those things. And it's a team that requires a lot of patience at both ends of the field to play.
And the first 5 to 10 minutes are important because you got to contrast the styles here. Syracuse wants to go up and down the field. Now, the Princeton game was kind of an extreme, but they want to play fast. Maryland does not. You mentioned it. They have not scored more than 14 goals all year. They want to really hone in, control, be physical, and try and take the other team out of their strength. And that's Syracuse's strength. When they're free-flowing and that ball is moving, they are tough to stop. So I'm going to be as fascinated as anybody how they do that. Syracuse played Maryland earlier this year. It was in really crappy weather, and it was mid-February, rain, hovering around 40 degrees or so, which will play to Maryland's strength. And Logan McEnany tends to do this, Patrick, as you know. He's one of the best goalies in the country, if not the best goalie in the country. He's been there for 100 years at Maryland. But he stole that game from Syracuse in the sense that if you're going to score on him, you have got to have some well-placed shots. You've got to take advantage of the possessions, and Syracuse just didn't get enough to get by you. And you mentioned the preparation that Maryland's going to have here, how well coached they are here. So I am struck by this, though. Syracuse found a way around one of its main ingredients against Princeton, and I get this is a different game. But John Mullen was not John Mullen in that game. 9 face-off penalties, procedure penalties, which is an insane amount. And Syracuse has been so reliant all year on just getting everything they can out of all those possessions. So I'm thinking they can find a way, I don't want to say a way around Maryland and what they do, but they showed me something in how they can adjust. But I guess Maryland is probably the toughest style to adjust to when you get away from what you do and you want to do what you do to be successful in the Final Four. So that's my long-winded way of saying I think Syracuse can adjust, but I don't know if they can adjust against Maryland the way that they did against Princeton. If they're going to win this game, they've got to take control of it early and make Maryland adapt to what they do.
Yeah, you have to force Maryland to chase you a little bit. When you think about, for example, what Rutgers was able to do to them. Rutgers got up early and had long possessions and managed to survive 8-6. Michigan had long possessions throughout their game. And it wasn't necessarily a lot of chasing, but they kind of did to Maryland what Maryland does to a lot of other people. And then Ohio State just got off to a quick start and was frankly just better that day. I mean, and Ohio State had a lot of really good days this season. To go to your point about the faceoffs, a game that's 19-18 or 14-13 means that faceoff advantage should theoretically mean more. In a game that's 11-7 and you've got a shot clock, that faceoff advantage doesn't mean as much. He's just simply not out there as much. So I'm curious to see whether that gets negated a little bit. Just simply, if you get a game where there's only 22 faceoffs, Syracuse can go 13-9, 13-22, and that's a nice advantage. But does it make a massive difference? One extra possession a quarter might make some, but I don't think it's necessarily like what you saw against Harvard, for example. And so that's something that's worth pointing out. I will also say, a lot is made of, and I've mentioned it already, Maryland's preparation advantage under John Tillman. You give him a week, 11-1 in quarterfinals. Spoken about a little bit less is that they're like 8-2 or 8-3 in semifinals in those situations where you've got 6 or 7 days to get ready. And then you turn it around and he's 2-6 in title games. Like, you see the preparation advantage in their actual outcomes there, which is why I feel very confident that Syracuse is probably not going to get the thing that it wants most. It might get what it wants the third most or the fourth most and have those opportunities. But Maryland is going to make life extremely difficult given this turnaround, given the opportunity to put some stuff in this week. And it's going to be up to Syracuse to go to option 3, option 4, option 5. And I'm not saying they can't get it done, but it's not going to necessarily be this is the most conventional way Syracuse can win a game. It's probably going to be somewhat unconventional.
I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for Syracuse because, to Tillman's credit, not only the preparation that you mentioned, Patrick, but you tell me if I'm wrong here, but with Maryland, flip it the other way. If I'm Maryland and I'm saying to myself, okay, if I can contain Joey Spallina, if I can keep 2 or 3 guys, if you want to go through the list, Spallina, Hiltz, and try and put a monkey wrench in the midfield a little bit, right? Like, don't let Michael Leo get open. Make Luke Roa take those outside shots. Like, there is a pretty clear plan there. I look at Maryland and I don't see that. And that's to their credit, because they could just hurt you from so many other areas. And they play as a team, and they don't have those standout offensive players. They've got a couple good players, don't get me wrong, but they don't have a Spallina, right? They don't have a Kavanaugh. They don't have there's a bleaking spotlight on that guy. And if we can slow him down, we got a chance. They spread it out so much that Syracuse's defense, I think, is going to be spread thin a little bit here to find that method.
I would tell you that the one thing that I think, and it kind of ties into something we've already talked about, that I do think that Maryland is a little vulnerable in, is can you get them unsettled? Can you get them in transition? Can you get them off the faceoff? And I think about a guy like Sam English, who I think is going to be one of the most important players in this game for Syracuse, because he is on that faceoff wing a lot of the time. He can go and do some damage very quickly. And the way you get them is you get them as early as you can in an unsettled spot, because if they get you 6-on-6, you're going to be not making a whole lot of progress a lot of the time. They just are really, Kevin Warren from Georgetown explained it really well. Sometimes they show that they're sliding. Sometimes it's a half slide. Sometimes it's like one step and they go back, and they basically make you think. And the next thing you know, you've spun the ball around 3 or 4 times and you're down to 20 seconds on the shot clock because you just haven't been able to make any headway. So I do think that, being able to maybe score a couple off faceoffs, a couple defense to offense would be really, really helpful. And I think too, it's worth bringing up at this point that your Syracuse and your goalie has not been as great the last couple games as he has been most of the season. It was interesting. I was talking to Anish Shroff from ESPN before the game yesterday. He's like, I'd like to see what the numbers are, Jimmy McCool against Ivy League teams and non-Ivy League teams. So I ran the numbers. Against Ivy League teams, his save percentage is like 34.5%. Against everybody else, it's almost 60%.
Wow.
So, like, the difference in those 4 games, the 2 Harvards, Cornell, and Princeton, and against other teams that maybe don't, maybe lean a little bit more on defense and don't have to push the pace as much and aren't as used to it, is pretty significant. So I actually am thinking he's going to have a little bit of a bounce back day too against a more conventional team, certainly, than the one that he saw the other day.
Great idea by Anish and great execution by you in finding that stat. That's good stuff there.
Point to the passer, right?
Patrick, as you zoom out a little bit here and we look at all 4 teams that are heading to Foxborough here, do you think the big story is that Syracuse is back? Is that the commanding headline of this weekend?
Yeah, I think going in, that's the thing that's going to draw the most attention. But I also think it's worth pointing out that you've got the best team in the country, has the best player in the country, and they're aiming to end a title drought that's almost 50 years old at this point in Cornell. And we talked about title windows opening for Syracuse and maybe staying open for Maryland. Well, I think that not that it's going to slam shut on Cornell, but the window's never going to be bigger than it is right now. You've got all these guys that played in that 0-2 title game, that Final Four team, and have been chasing this opportunity to get back ever since. It's a really hungry bunch. They spin the ball about as well as anybody has. I mean, frankly, better than some of the teams that we've seen the last few years that were really good. I mean, their passing it's at 2002 Maryland level. I mean, I think it might even be better than what we saw from Notre Dame the last couple of years, which is saying something. So I really think that that's a big part of this story as well. And then, I think Penn State's probably kind of the overlooked team in all of this, a team that, actually has beaten Cornell. So, they're the only ones that were able to do it. But I do think that, the obvious story to draw in casual fans is Syracuse is back. But I think that, from a lacrosse perspective, it's can Cornell finish the job here?
3 of the 4 coaches there are looking for their first national championships as coaches. Gary Gates certainly won a few as a player. And it's been a long time since Jeff Tambroni was at Cornell, and Connor Busick did not cross paths with Jeff Tambroni. But I still like that juicy storyline of if Jeff Tambroni is going to, West Jenny grad, local guy, is going to take Penn State to the national championship game, he's got – your past always comes back. This is a sport that has seen exponential growth, Patrick, but it's still a very small community, as you know. Everybody knows everybody, and you've coached with or played with everybody in the sport, it seems, somewhere along the way. So I just like the beauty in the fact that if Tambroni's going to make that next step, his past is coming back in a way here, and he's got to beat Cornell, a program that he brought back to a high level. And Connor Busick is trying to get Cornell, as you mentioned, their first national championship in 50 years. They have lost their last 5 national championship games. They are back on the high level. And when you have CJ Kirst, who, just give him the Tourathon right now, one of the absolute best players, not only in the sport now that I think we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, like, this is the moment here. This is the moment to take advantage of it. So having seen what Richmond did to Cornell, and you mentioned it, Penn State had to crawl itself out of a pretty deep hole to win that game. What do you think is the key in that Cornell-Penn State matchup when they get on the field?
Well, I think if you're Cornell, you feel like this is a rare opportunity this season for payback, because they had a late penalty, the non-releasable penalty, and it helped Penn State get back in that game the first time around, and then Penn State wins in overtime. It's a game that if you're Cornell, you probably feel like you should have won, just because you take away that penalty, and it's hard to imagine Penn State stringing all of those goals together all at once. So there's that element to it. I want to add a little bit of symmetry here to all of this. Remember, Tambroni did get Cornell to Memorial Day once. They had a lead, and it slipped away, and they lose in overtime on the Cody Jamison goal in 2009, which is Syracuse's last national titles. So there's all these threads throughout this Final Four.
At Foxborough, right? If I'm not
in
mistaken.
Foxborough, no
in
less.
Foxborough, yeah.
So, you look at all of that stuff and all these things kind of tie together. I do agree with you that it is sort of apt for Tambroni to have to go through Cornell. At the same time, it has been long enough that, they're at the point where people are comfortable enough scheduling each other, right? Like you probably don't want to schedule Penn State Cornell in 2012, a year after you leave Cornell. But at this point, like enough time has passed, and there's obviously a lot of pride that Jeff has from his time in Ithaca and all the challenges and all of the triumphs that they were able to experience in those 9-10 years or so. You look at Cornell, obviously a lot of tradition there, and Penn State. I mean, it's kind of time to think of them as almost a Memorial Day weekend regular. It's 3 times in the last 6 tournaments now. And that was a program that for a long time, you just kind of slotted them in. They're going to be like number 17, and maybe they'll pick somebody off, but they're not really going to be relevant. And he has done a nice job of, not just improving them, but getting them to the point, especially the last 2 Final Fours, where maybe they weren't his best team, but they were able to figure things out in the postseason and get to this point. And that's one of those things that you have to have a lot of respect for. So gotta appreciate that first semifinal every bit as much as the second one, because there definitely are storylines flowing through both of them.
And I appreciate the level that CJ Kirst is on. But Matt Traynor, what he did for Penn State, just pointed at his back and said, let's go. And the way he plowed through that Notre Dame defense was something to behold. So we can't leave him out of the conversation of some of the amazing players we're going to see this weekend. But with Kirst, I have to note this, Patrick. I should have grabbed a ruler and slapped myself on the wrist for it, because you looked at Kirst numbers in that matchup against Richmond. You're like, he's done better. But then you look at ground balls. Like, okay, yeah, 10 exactly. So lesson learned. CJ Kirst never has a meh game. He'll do something else, even if he's not scoring, that certainly fuels that victory. And I just have to combine this too. I don't think I've ever seen a player around the crease like Ryan Goldstein. It's like he skates around the crease. He works that crease unlike anybody I think I've seen do it. And there's been a lot of great attackmen that I've seen in my day, and certainly that you have seen. But it is so unique how he works that crease. He is so tough to defend there.
Well, I think some of it comes down to how many attackmen have you seen that are like starters that are listed at 5'8", 145. There's not many jitterbugs like that. And that's, he just sliding around the crease is certainly one way of putting it. But he is elusive, and you're just not, there's just different angles to deal with somebody that size, that maybe he can get some stuff off that other guys might not be able to, particularly down low. So certainly he's somebody that has certainly fit in extremely well with Kirst and Michael Long, whose ability to, kind of be the table setter on a lot of fronts for that team needs to be mentioned as well. I mean, that guy is one of the smartest players in Division I right now. So you have that. You have a really good first midfield. They ran the second midfield liberally against Richmond. I know that that's something they've been able to do a lot of the season. And you look at them and you see that depth, and you're like, that bodes well in case you happen to get to Monday. You think about, why did Notre Dame win last year and the year before? They were deeper. Maryland was top head, had a lot of talent, but they could go a little bit deeper in 22. You keep going back through these championship teams, and that depth tends to matter. And it's certainly something I think that we can look for from Cornell if they do make it to Monday.
Going to be a heck of a weekend, one way or the other. The energy of Syracuse being back, a lot of great players, 2 great matchups, and boy, it's going to be tough to top last weekend for sure, but they will surely try, and we're going to see some great lacrosse one way or the other. Patrick, always appreciate your time and your insight. Keep up the great work, and you can check out Patrick's work on the NCAA tournament for USA Lacrosse Magazine. We will see you in Foxborough, my friend.
Safe travels, Brent. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again to Patrick Stevens for joining us here on Syracuse Sports. We got a couple other pods for you this week, guys, and I think there could be a post-game show coming from Gillette Stadium. Saturday night, no matter what happens between Syracuse and Maryland. So the pods are going to be firing. The Syracuse Sports Insiders are fired up. Stay in touch all week long, especially if you're heading to Foxborough. Would love to hear you guys. And being a Syracuse Sports Insider could not be easier. The information is there on your screen. If you're watching on YouTube, for those of you just listening, join subtext.com/Syracuse Sports. Hit that website, sign up. It's free to try for 2 weeks and just $3.99 a month after that. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you get direct text message access to me anytime. You just want to shoot the breeze, talk SU sports, shoot me a text. You got a question about Syracuse sports, shoot me a text. You have a question you want me to ask Syracuse players and coaches in all sports, shoot me a text, right? You get the point. You get direct text message access to me anytime. If I have breaking news, you get it first. The latest news, insight, information, analysis, opinion, and so much more on Syracuse sports sent right to your phone. Being a Syracuse Sports Insider is awesome. And we've got a growing community of Syracuse sports fans that are joining every day, and we would love for you to be part of the club. Get in the Cool Kids Club. So sign up today, and can't wait to hear from you guys as we go through this week up to the Final Four. Syracuse and Maryland and Foxborough, Cornell and Penn State as well. Going to be a great week to talk lacrosse. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to please subscribe to Syracuse Sports. You can do that on Spotify. You can do that on Apple. You can do that on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, while you're there, leave us a review, leave us a comment. It helps us stand out in the podcast world. That would be fantastic if you could do that. I've been trying to get in the YouTube comments a little bit more, responding to you guys there as well. So leave us a comment anytime, not only about the pod itself, but just what you think, and just about, what you thought about what Patrick Stevens said about Syracuse, Maryland. Maybe you disagree with that. Get in those comments and let us know. Thanks to Max Scialdone. Great music from him. And if you would like your original music featured here on Syracuse Sports, all the information is in the show notes on that. Basically, you just got to shoot me an email and we get permission to use your music. And that's pretty much it, right? So we've had a lot of great local artists featured here, but you do not have to be in or from Central New York to have your music featured, though. That's pretty cool when it happens. But no matter where you are, Syracuse fans are everywhere. And if you want your original music featured here on Syracuse Sports, get in touch, and we'd love to help you out. Thanks for listening. It's another episode of Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe. We will catch you next time, guys. Let's listen to 80 songs in its entirety from our guy, Max Scialdone.
Each one I've heard takes my breath